Hello, and welcome to Western Roman History. On the 22nd of August, AD 408, the Emperor Honorius executed the leading general and statesman of the day, Flavius Stilicho, the master of the soldiers of the Western Roman Empire. To carry out the deed was a man called Heraclianus. For this act, Heraclianus was rewarded with the appointment of Comes Africae, the military governor of North Africa. Yet only 5 years later, Heraclianus would rebel and lead troops against Honorius. This video discusses this unlikely usurper and his failed rebellion. If you enjoy this video, remember to like and subscribe to Eastern Roman History, my gratitude to my generous patrons on Patreon. And now let us continue. We have no record of Heraclianus before his execution of Stilicho in AD 408, but he must have been an officer in the Roman army before this point. He was sent to replace Honorius, the brother-in-law of Stilicho, who previously had been appointed as Comes Africae in AD 401. He arrived in the province the following year, whilst Alaric the Visigoth proclaimed the senator Priscus Attalus as emperor to rival Honorius. As military governor, Heraclianus pursued an imperial crackdown on Donatist heretics in North Africa. This would culminate in AD 411 with the Church Council at Carthage, which officially condemned Donatism as a Christian heresy. Africa soon became a flashpoint in the war with the Goths, when the rival emperor Priscus Attalus sent a small army of Roman soldiers to the province to conquer it. He had refused the aid of the Goths because he had been assured by diviners that he did not need their assistance. When the rebels arrived in North Africa, Heraclianus led the defence of his province, destroying the invasion force. Once secured, Heraclianus sent much needed funds to the Emperor Honorius, allowing him to pay his armies and ensure their loyalty during Alaric's successful campaign against Liguria. Furthermore, the Count of Africa ceased sending grain shipments to Rome to undermine Attalus's puppet regime by inducing a famine. This forced the Goths to abandon Attalus, depose him, and reopen negotiations with the Emperor Honorius. While he was busy with this, the Comes Africae had little time to provide succour for a score of Italian refugees that fled to Africa. We next hear of Heraclianus in AD 413, when he was appointed consul. Later that same year, he set sail with a small army to Italy. The great mystery is why Heraclianus, the loyal retainer of the emperor, rebelled in the first place. One historian, Stein, argued that he wished to avoid repercussions for crimes he committed against those refugees to North Africa, as attested by St. Jerome. But he was writing in AD 414 after Heraclianus was dead, and is therefore not a reliable source. Orosius said of Heraclianus, "Heraclian sided with him, his son-in-law, when Sabinus was suspected of dangerous designs. After withholding the African grain supply for some time contrary to law, Heraclian set sail in person for Rome, accompanied by a huge fleet, the size of which was unheard of, at least in our times." Yet other historians, including Oost and Wijnendaele, have ascribed Heraclianus' rebellion to his anxiety over the rise of the general Constantius, the other of Honorius' most loyal and competent retainers. When Honorius ordered Constantius to kill Olympius, Heraclianus lost his patron at court. In AD 412, there was a further development, where Honorius issued an edict to Constantius ordering him to stop officers from hunting down deserters in North Africa under penalty of death. It is curious that this was addressed to the commander of the forces in Gaul and not to Heraclianus. It also implies that it was Constantius' responsibility to effect these changes, giving him some authority over North Africa, thereby raising Constantius above Heraclianus. However, in contrast to all the other usurpers of Honorius' reign, He never proclaimed himself emperor. Although he was later dubbed as a tyrant, the word employed to describe usurper by some historians, such as Orosius and Hydatius. He was never called as such by Emperor Honorius himself. In his law condemning Heraclianus and his followers, he stated, "We adjudge that Heraclianus is a public enemy, and with due authorization we decree that he shall be punished, and that his ill-omened head shall be cut off. We pursue his statalities also with like criminal prosecution. But we grant permission to all private citizens and members of the imperial service that they shall have full power to denounce all these statalities before the public officials. And then, the name of Heraclianus shall not be preserved in private or public recollection, and we therefore decree that all the acts that are said to have been done under him shall be nullified. Therefore, it would be inaccurate to call Heraclianus a usurper, but rather a rebel." After the destruction of Jovinus's regime in Gaul in 413, Heraclianus ceased grain shipments to Rome from North Africa. Wijnendaele has reasoned that Heraclianus suspended the grain shipments to sabotage Constantius and Honorius's negotiations with the Visigoths. The latter had defeated Jovinus in exchange for a large provision of grain. With North Africa in rebellion, Constantius failed to uphold the agreement, turning the Visigoths hostile once again. He then assembled a small army from the forces he commanded in North Africa and his own retinue, and set sail for Italy. Orosius commented that Heraclianus had 3,700 ships, an impossibly large number. However, if this absurd number included both grain transports and warships, it is quite possible that Heraclianus could have assembled a much larger flotilla than normal. By combining the accounts of Orosius and Hydatius, we get a picture of Heraclianus' brief campaign in Italy. After his forces made landfall, they marched towards and bypassed Rome, heading up the Via Flaminia towards Ravenna and the Emperor. He experienced no resistance on his way, as the majority of imperial forces were deployed elsewhere. Finally, at the town of Vitriculum, he encountered an imperial army commanded by Count Marinus. Hydatius reported, "Heraclianus, after being defeated at Utricalum, after being defeated at Utricularum, Heraclianus, after being defeated at Utricularum, after being defeated at Utricalum in Italy in a battle which lasted in the which result Heraclianus, after being defeated at Utricalum, in Italy in a battle which resulted in the slaughter of 50,000 soldiers, he fled to Africa." While Hydatius' figure for the fallen is impressive, it is probably wrong. In AD 409, both Alaric and the Roman Senate of Priscus Attalus considered 500 Gothic warriors sufficient to subjugate Heraclianus' garrison in North Africa. In AD 398, 5,000 soldiers were assembled against Count Gildo. This indicates that the army under Heraclianus' command was quite small in comparison to the usual size of Roman field armies in Europe, being around 15 to 30,000 soldiers. Imperial forces were also likely to have been a tiny force. Since Constantius was in Gaul with the main army, and any spare units would have been deployed to the remaining frontiers, Count Marinus may have been the comes domesticorum, whom commanded the imperial bodyguard to confront Heraclianus. Heraclianus' gambit to reach Honorius and perhaps persuade him to give him the prime military position in the empire over the burgeoning power of Constantius had failed. He fled to Carthage, and there in the Aedes Memoriae he was murdered by soldiers bribed by Honorius to assassinate him. So much for Heraclianus. The revolt of Heraclianus was in essence the desire of one man to gain or at least prevent Constantius from becoming the senior lieutenant of Honorius in the years after the execution of Stilicho and Olympius. While it is obvious that Heraclianus had identified that Constantius was eclipsing him in importance, he seemed to have failed to grasp the desires of Honorius. If it was indeed Honorius whom sent troops to intercept Heraclianus, the latter's actions of scuppering negotiations in Gaul, illegally leaving his province, even if he merely intended to speak with Honorius, may well have signed his own death warrant by frustrating the emperor's new strategy in the West, regardless of his loyalty in the years before. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe for more. Thank you very much to my patrons for their generous support. The next video shall be about the usurper Priscus Attalus, and this has been Western Roman History.